Yeah, I don't know if I should go on record and tell you how I use it in my ministry because, well, it's like anything. Like you said, social
Mm,
media, technology on the whole has the potential to be damaging to society. I do a presentation for pastors on AI and social media in the church. And I
mm,
open the presentation by asking, I'm like, what is your opinion of social media? Like like what's your value assessment of it? And let people just talk about why it's good or why it's bad or whatever. And then there's this quote, but it says, and I have it up with a blank in it. It says, "Blank will be the ruin of education in America." And then it goes into this whole thing about how students use these devices one time and then throw them away, and it is striking at the values of thrift and frugality and something else, right?
mm.
So it's like this technology is striking at the moral underpinning of our society, right? And so then I ask people, what is the blank? Like, what is this thing, that we're talking about? And they're like AI, Facebook, laptops, and I'm like, older, got to go older. It is literally ballpoint pens,
Oh, here we go.
right? And I've seen the same
Wow.
thing for leaded pencils. I've seen the
Yep.
same thing for typewriters, where there
Mm,
there is this place whenever technology is new that the old guard of the old technology,
mm.
the sky is falling, the sky is falling, right? They go full chicken little on it that like, this is going to be the worst thing that's ever happened to us.
Mm.
We'll never come back from this. So there's still a lot of that going on within the church, within the context of how we would utilize AI as pastors. And I look at it as there's no fundamental difference for me using AI in sermon preparation if I'm using it
Mhm,
responsibly, and we can talk about what that is in a minute if we want,
mhm,
than there
mm.
was when the concordance came out, right?
Yep.
Because before the
Mhm.
concordance, you had to know where the verses were. You had to know what the verses, you were looking for were. You had to know where
Mm.
they were. You couldn't go get a neat list in a book that big that gave you all the verses that had a particular word in it alphabetized for you to go find. So AI
Mm.
is as much of cheating on sermon prep today as using a
Mm.
concordance was when it came out, whenever it came out, right? And all the technological
Yes.
advances in between at each time could be said to have been a a a uh, a degrading factor in the efficacy of the preparation of the pastor and undercutting the Holy Spirit.
Mm.
When I first heard about ChatGPT, the first thing I did was I went and I said, write me a sermon on Revelation 13 from an SDA perspective. I didn't say Seventh day Adventist, I said
Yep.
SDA. And it
Mhm.
knocked out a banger. Like, if you just wanted to buy
Mhm.
the book,
Yep.
Seventh day Adventist sermon on Revelation 13, like it was just pop, 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 pop. It was solid, right? And this was like
Mm.
when you still had to like, waiting list to even get access to ChatGPT, right? So like very beginning, right? And
Mm.
now it's even more so. So yeah, you could just go give me a sermon and then go read the thing. But there's whole websites available now where you can go on and buy pre-written sermons and read those sermons.
Yep.
So what's the
Mhm.
difference? There is none, right? So I use
Mhm.
AI as a researching partner and as an
Mm.
ideation partner.
Mm.
The way that I sermon prep is it's very heady. I typically like
Mm.
to have multiple sermons that I know are that I either want to preach or I'm going to preach in the next like several months cooking at the same time. Then when it gets time to like for instance this week I have a concept that I'm working on that I've been chewing on for several weeks. I started working on it 2 weeks ago when I was sermon prepping and then went a different direction and now I'm picking it back up. So I just start talking to Claude. And I'm like, "Hey Claude, I'm working on a sermon
Yeah.
and this is what it is and this is the point that I'm wanting to make. Here's the story that I'm wanting to
Mm.
use. Here's the verses that I'm thinking about in conjunction with this. Is there anything else that would be helpful for me to know that would
Mm.
help this be a more, rich or
Mhm.
effective, presentation?" Right? So then
Mm.
instead of me like there's no nobility in like Google searching versus telling my AI like, "Hey, this is where I'm wanting to go."
Yeah.
I know
Mm.
the verses that I want to push. I know the thesis of the message, right? I
Mm.
use it to help me cut down that prep time of I'm Googling, I'm trying to remember a verse, right? Like, and
Yeah.
what I have found is that, and especially as Claude has gotten to know me, and I've
Mm.
fed it a bunch of my past sermons. So I have a database that's got a bunch of my sermon transcripts in, so it knows my voice, it knows my logic, it knows the way I put my messages together. That
Mhm.
it is kind of eerie how much it thinks like me, you know,
Yeah.
in that regard. So I use it as that kind of tool to help me save that time on the grunt work of preparation for
Mm.
Bible studies or sermon prep. Because same thing, if I'm going to be leading a Bible study for Sabbath school, or you know, another group setting, or I'm going to be doing a Vespers talk or something like that, you know, whereas I used to need to sit down and spend 2 or 3 hours outlining my notes to get it out of my head into a usable form. Now I can spend, you know, 30 minutes talking to Claude and get the same workable outline that then I then go
Yeah.
and use just as kind of my foundation to go from. I've heard of presidents telling pastors that if they catch you using AI to work on your sermons, they'll fire you. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
that's a little extreme,
Yeah.
guys. It's a little extreme. But I think
Yeah.
everyone thinks that the only thing to do is like go to AI and ask it, like, give me a sermon on, right? So it's just using the
Yes.
tool, right? Not cheating with the
Mm.
tool, but using the tool the way it's meant
Mm.
to be used, you know?
Yeah, I fully agree, by the way. I use Claude in the same way. The thing that am worried about is you and I, we learned to preach in a time that was before all of this input, right? Before all
Mhm.
this was available. And so what I look at my kids, like, and I think, by the time, if my son decides to preach, when he gets to the place where he's learning how to do that, he can choose to either learn how to have disciplined and critical thinking, or he can ask Claude and get exactly like a perfect presentation and not
Mhm.
have to work for it and not have to learn how to think well. And I think that's the thing that I'm concerned about. I think you're using it in a way that's absolutely great. The thing that I'm thinking is, man, if that was available to me when I first started preaching, would I have developed the muscles to be able to clearly articulate what I want to speak about and to be able to interact with the Holy Spirit and understand how that works in order to be able to leverage smart tools later? And so I think that's the risk that we have. But I think that the question is, how do we solve? That's the problem I think there is to solve. The problem is not stopping pastors from using AI. The problem is, how do we help our young people develop the critical thinking abilities
Mhm.
before they are using those tools, right?
Yeah, I get worried about that too.
Mm.
I think that AI is going to necessitate a new system of thinking if we want to get into like put our futurist hats on here for a minute. It's going to
Yeah, that's
create
always
a
fun.
new way of interacting and a new way of processing. But I share the same concern
Mm.
that probably people had when the abacus came out, you know, of
Mm.
like
Yeah.
this is going
Yes.
to
They
prevent.
don't have to remember all the numbers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I do worry about that for my own son. Is like, how do you do that? Now,
Mm.
there's a school here in Texas called Alpha School. It's not an Adventist school, but it's an AI
Mm.
school, and
Mm.
they are leveraging
I found these
AI.
guys on Instagram. I saw these guys.
Alpha
They're
School,
amazing.
McKinsey,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah,
Mm.
they're using AI to get the rote part of education down, and then teaching the students how to take the learning and collaborate, like I was just sharing, with AI to create businesses and products. And you know, so middle schoolers are actually like not just getting the information, and like school's not 100% about just rote memorization, but it's about how do we get the information in an effective way for the student, and AI helps them create that. And then they have, you know, the teachers or coaches that help them learn how to really apply it correctly, to build
Mm.
businesses and use it in real life. And I think that
Yeah.
that's where we need to try to get, and this has been the thrust of
Mm.
like the sessions that I've done for, like, here in Texas we have a volunteer lay pastor program. So we have 100 and something volunteer lay pastors, and so I'm on the team that
Mm.
helps resource them. And you know, I was talking to them about this topic, and it's like, rather than stoking fear, we need to
Mm.
engage the conversation to the best that we can and have the relationships in place so that we can try to guide people into making better choices. So rather than just claiming that it's going to be, you know, the worst thing ever, Like, it's not going to
Mm.
go away. Where, no more than we were
Yeah.
able to talk social media down, no more than people were able to talk TV down, no more than we've been able
Mhm.
to avert any technological advance, unless you're super down the Trotaria TikTok, thing. But like, you know, like we haven't been able to avoid these things, just fear mongering about it. Right? We need to actually engage it and help figure out the solution. And for me with my kids, like they're still young enough. I'm not into this yet, but that's the thing. Like
Mm.
there's value in the rote memorization from a logic perspective and a
Mm.
memory perspective, but the capacity, like my son's in
Mm.
kindergarten,
Mm.
and I was trying to help him with math tonight. He's in first
Mhm.
grade. This is the
Yep.
problem with technology. Start forgetting things. He's in first grade, and I'm struggling to figure out how to do his first grade math.
Hmm.
Like
Yep.
and it's not that it's hard math. We're just dealing with it, but they're already teaching him algebra principles in first grade.
Mm.
But the
Hmm.
way that they're teaching the math is so fundamentally different from the way that I was taught math that
Mm.
even though I know it's just an addition problem, but the way they're making it, and I know
Mm.
now that like, oh,
Mm.
they're teaching him to do addition with algebraic thinking, which is going to benefit him in the future. But
Yep.
for me, it's just like I'm halfway lost. But when I
Yeah.
see the result of like these kids in fifth and sixth grade that can do these ridiculous problems like off their head, just like snapping them out,
Mm.
and it's because of the way they were taught. So this change that so many parents, I don't know if y'all had this kind of shift
Mm.
in Australia, but over here they changed the way math was done a few years ago, and parents been losing their minds. Oh, I don't know how to do it. I can't help my kids. This is so stupid. We just need to go back
Mm.
to the way we did it. But it's like
Mm.
the net end result for the kid is they are so much more capable, even though it's a very different
Mm.
approach. So I think the same thing is going to
Mhm.
happen with AI. The same thing is happening now. We're late to the curve with like, we were talking about,
Mhm.
10 years ago, we were trying to do podcasts before it was cool, and people are just
Yeah.
starting to catch up now. I think COVID really ramped the church up and like made them realize like you got to push into technology. The thing that I
Yeah.
that I am concerned about now is that many churches, like they all kind of came up to par on live streaming and all the things they were doing, but the platforms have moved on, and now they're just kind of
Mm.
stuck comfortable with what they were doing, and they're not keeping an eye on what is actually moving forward. I think that
Mm.
the coaching economy gives us a lot of insight to what pastoral ministry and outreach could look like, because with the rise of AI, the premium is going to become not on the information, because you can go to Claude and ask it for whatever information you want right now, and it can give you
Yeah.
an
Mhm.
exhaustive account, right? With a high degree of accuracy. It's not gonna be perfect, but it's gonna be
Mm.
high.
Mhm.
But what it can't give you is my lived experience and your lived experience.
Yes.
And so where this rise in coaching is coming from is this personal relationship that's now activated through a digital space of
Mm.
realizing there's something that I want to learn how to do. That person knows what to do, and I could Google it and know, or ask AI and know what to do, but I don't know how
Mm.
to do it the way they did it. And so there's a premium in me
Mhm.
connecting with that person. And I think ministry,
Yeah.
if we think about that in that same context, we're using technology to find the connections that invite people to avail themselves of our spiritual maturity. We're further down the path than they are, but we have to be
Mhm.
communicating in a way and using methods that align with what is actually working in the world, like where technology is going. And if we can get out on that bleeding edge, I think there's a lot of opportunity, but usually we kind of follow behind because we're somewhat skeptical and we're worried about how to
Yeah.
use it. If we can get out there, I think there's a lot of opportunity to really grow and do some unique things.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Blue Vineyard Podcast. For more episodes, information about our services, and more, please visit bluevineyard.com.